Sometimes life gives you one impossible moment that makes you question everything you thought was true. My name is Daniel Brooks, and for 3 years I believed I had already lived through the worst day of my life. 3 years earlier, I stood beside a gravesite saying goodbye to my wife, Emily. At least that was what I had been told to believe. Since then, every morning had begun the same way. I woke up, packed my 7-year-old son Lucas's lunch, helped him get ready for school, and tried my best to be both a father and a mother at the same time. There were difficult days when I wondered whether I was doing enough, and there were quiet nights when I caught myself looking at old family photographs long after Lucas had fallen asleep. He still remembered his mother in small ways. Whenever he saw sunflowers, he smiled because they had been her favorite. Whenever we baked chocolate chip cookies together, he insisted they never tasted quite like hers. Children have a way of holding on to love even when time keeps moving forward. I admired that about him, even if it broke my heart a little every time. Our trip began as an attempt to create a new memory together. Lucas had never flown on an airplane since Emily passed away, and I thought a weekend vacation in Colorado might help both of us leave behind some of the sadness we had carried for far too long. At the airport, he bounced with excitement as he watched airplanes taxi across the runway through the giant terminal windows. His smile reminded me that healing was not forgetting. It was learning to keep living while carrying the people you loved in your heart. We boarded the aircraft just before sunset. The cabin lights glowed softly as passengers settled into their seats, overhead bins closed, and flight attendants completed their final safety checks. Lucas sat beside the window, pressing his forehead gently against the glass as he watched the airport workers below. Every few minutes he pointed excitedly at another airplane taking off. Seeing him so happy made me feel that maybe this trip had been the right decision after all. Once we reached cruising altitude, the cabin became quieter. Some passengers opened books. Others watched movies or closed their eyes. Lucas leaned across me to look farther down the aisle, his expression suddenly changing from excitement to complete confusion. His eyes grew wide, and every bit of color seemed to disappear from his face. He slowly raised one small finger toward the back of the aircraft. "Dad," he whispered so softly that I almost asked him to repeat himself. Then he said something that made every sound around me disappear. "Dad, that is Mom." My heart stopped. I turned toward him, expecting him to say he had imagined someone who looked familiar. Children sometimes confuse strangers with people they missed. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder and tried to smile. "Buddy," I said quietly, "sometimes people remind us of someone we love." But Lucas never looked away. His finger remained pointed toward the last few rows of seats. "No," he answered with complete certainty. "It is really Mom." She smiled at me. A cold wave of disbelief ran through my entire body. Against every piece of logic I possessed, I slowly turned my head toward the rear of the airplane. Several passengers were standing near the lavatory while others waited in the aisle. Then, just for a brief moment between two people reaching into the overhead compartments, I caught sight of a woman turning her head toward our row. My breath caught in my chest. The profile, the dark brown hair resting on her shoulders, the gentle way she tucked a loose strand behind her ear. Every detail looked painfully familiar. Before I could stand or call out, another passenger stepped into the aisle and completely blocked my view. When the aisle cleared again only seconds later, the woman was gone. For the rest of the flight, I could not stop thinking about what Lucas had said. I kept looking toward the back of the airplane, hoping I would see that woman again, hoping I would find some simple explanation that would make everything feel normal. Maybe she was someone who looked like Emily. Maybe my son's memory had connected familiar features to the person he missed most. I wanted to believe that because the alternative was impossible. Emily had been gone for 3 years. I had accepted that reality every single day. But the look on Lucas's face was not the look of a child making a random mistake. He looked certain. He looked like he had seen someone he loved. I asked him quietly to describe the woman. He told me she had the same smile as Mom, the same voice, and the same little habit of touching her necklace when she was nervous. That detail made me stop. The necklace was something only our family knew about. Emily had worn a small silver necklace almost every day. It was not expensive, but it had a special meaning because it was the first gift I gave her after we got married. I looked at Lucas and realized he was not simply saying someone looked like his mother. He was remembering details. After the plane landed in Denver, I waited until most passengers had left before grabbing our bags. I told myself I only needed to know if I had imagined everything. Lucas held my hand as we walked through the terminal, but his eyes kept searching the crowd. "Dad, she was here," he said softly. I believed him, even though I did not understand how that could be possible. We walked toward the gate area, scanning every face around us. People moved in every direction carrying luggage, checking phones, and meeting family members. The airport was filled with ordinary moments, but I felt like I was trapped inside something I could not explain. Then Lucas suddenly stopped. He pointed toward a small coffee shop near the terminal entrance. "That is where she went." My heart started racing as we walked closer. But when we reached the counter, the woman was not there. I asked the employee if they had seen a woman matching the description Lucas gave. The employee thought for a moment and mentioned that several passengers had stopped there earlier, but nothing stood out. I thanked him and turned away, trying to hide my disappointment from Lucas. On the way to our hotel, I kept replaying the moment on the airplane. I remembered the brief glimpse I saw. I remembered the familiar expression. I remembered how impossible it seemed. That night, after Lucas fell asleep, I sat near the hotel window looking at the city lights below. I opened my phone and looked through old photographs of Emily. I had not done that in a long time. There were pictures from our wedding, family vacations, and ordinary days that had become precious memories. Then I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. In several photos, Emily wore the same silver necklace Lucas had described. My hands became still as I stared at the screen. I wanted to dismiss everything as coincidence, but too many details were connecting together. The next morning, I made a decision. I was not going to ignore what happened. I needed answers. Before leaving for the airport to return home, I contacted someone who had helped me with the paperwork after Emily's passing. I needed to review every detail again, every document, every record, every piece of information I had accepted without question. Because for the first time in 3 years, I had a reason to wonder if the story I had been told was not the complete story. And the most frightening part was not that Emily might have been alive. The most frightening part was realizing I had never truly known why she was gone. The next morning, I sat across from a woman named Karen Mitchell who had helped organize the documents after Emily's disappearance. I had not spoken with her in years. The moment she saw my face, she knew something was different. I placed my phone on the table and showed her the photograph of the woman my son believed was his mother. Karen studied the image carefully before looking back at me. "Daniel, where did you see this person?" she asked. I told her about the flight, about Lucas pointing down the aisle, and about the necklace. When I mentioned the necklace, her expression changed. She opened a folder from her old records and quietly reviewed several pages. My hands felt cold as I waited for her answer. "Daniel," she finally said, "there are things about Emily's case that were never fully explained." Those words were difficult to hear. For 3 years, I had believed there was a clear ending. Painful, but clear. Now I was being told there were unanswered questions. Karen explained that after the incident involving Emily, several records had been difficult to verify because of confusion surrounding the available information at the time. She had always believed there were missing details, but without new evidence, there was nothing more she could do. I asked her the question that had been sitting in my mind since the airplane. "Are you saying Emily could still be alive?" Karen did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the photograph again. "I am saying you should find out the truth before accepting what you were told." Those words stayed with me. Before accepting what you were told. I realized how much of my life had been built around a story I never questioned. I had trusted the information given to me because I had no reason not to. I had focused on surviving each day, raising Lucas, and creating a stable life for my son. But now every memory felt different. That afternoon, I returned to the hotel and found Lucas sitting on the floor drawing pictures with colored pencils. He looked up and smiled when I walked in. "Did you find Mom?" he asked. His simple question almost broke my heart because I did not know how to answer. I sat beside him and told him I was trying to understand what happened. I promised him that no matter what we discovered, I would always be there for him. Lucas nodded and quietly handed me his drawing. It was a picture of 3 people holding hands. Above them, he had drawn a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, he had written, "Our family." I held that paper for a long time. A 7-year-old child had more hope than I had allowed myself to have in 3 years. That evening, Karen contacted me again. She had found an old record connected to Emily's case that needed further review. There was one name mentioned in the document that neither of us expected to see. It belonged to someone who had been connected to Emily shortly before she disappeared. I stared at the message on my phone, realizing that the questions I had avoided for years were finally demanding answers. The next morning, Lucas and I changed our travel plans and stayed in Colorado a little longer. I did not know what we would discover. I did not know if the woman on the airplane was truly Emily or simply someone who looked like her. But for the first time, in 3 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. As I looked out at the city from our hotel window, I whispered a promise to my son. We would find the truth together. And whatever that truth was, we would face it as a family. The following morning, I woke up with a feeling I had not experienced in years. It was not certainty. It was not peace. It was the feeling that something impossible might actually have an explanation. Lucas was still asleep in the hotel room, holding the small drawing he had made the night before. I looked at the words he had written at the bottom of the page. Our family. Those 2 words reminded me why I could not stop searching. This was not only about my own questions anymore. It was about a little boy who had spent 3 years missing his mother and believing that a part of his family was gone forever. After breakfast, Karen called and asked me to meet her at her office. She had spent the night reviewing the old records connected to Emily's case. When I arrived, she had several documents spread across her desk. She looked tired but focused. Daniel, I found something that changes the way we need to look at this situation, she said. She explained that the original records showed several inconsistencies after the incident involving Emily. Some information had been incomplete, and some follow-up procedures had never been fully completed because everyone believed the case had reached a final conclusion. I looked at the papers in front of me and felt a strange mixture of anger and sadness. Not anger toward one person, but toward the years of uncertainty that had passed without answers. Karen pointed to a name in the documents. It was someone who had been listed as a witness shortly before Emily disappeared. That person had moved away shortly afterward, and no one had successfully contacted them again. I think this person may know something important, Karen explained. Before we could continue, my phone received a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it because I had received so many unfamiliar messages during the past few days. But something made me open it. There was only one sentence. Daniel, I know you saw her on the plane. I stared at the screen, unable to move. Karen immediately asked what happened. I showed her the message, and her expression became serious. Whoever sent it knew about the flight. They knew about Lucas. They knew about the woman we saw. The question was how. I replied with a simple question. Who are you? Several minutes passed before the response arrived. Someone who knows what happened to Emily. My heart started beating faster. After 3 years of believing I would never receive answers, I was suddenly standing in the middle of a mystery that was becoming more real with every moment. Karen advised me not to make any assumptions and reminded me that we needed facts. I agreed, but deep inside I felt that we were finally getting closer. That afternoon, Lucas and I visited a quiet park near the hotel. I wanted him to have a normal day instead of feeling surrounded by questions he was too young to carry. He ran across the grass, laughing as he chased falling leaves. Watching him reminded me that even during the hardest moments, children still found reasons to smile. When he came back, he sat beside me and asked, Dad, do you think Mom remembers us? I looked at my son and realized there was no answer I could give him that would be easy. I simply told him, I think if someone loves you, they never truly forget you. That night, another message arrived. This time, there was a location included. It was a small cafe about 20 minutes from our hotel. The message said only one thing. If you want the truth, come tomorrow morning. I looked at the address for a long time. 3 years of questions had led me to this moment. The next morning, I would finally meet the person who claimed to know what happened to Emily. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I barely slept because my mind kept returning to the same question. Who sent that message, and why did they know about Emily? Lucas was still sleeping peacefully in the hotel room, completely unaware of the storm of emotions surrounding us. I watched him for a moment and remembered the years when I had to explain why his mother was not coming home. I remembered every birthday candle he wished over, every school event where he looked toward the entrance hoping she would appear, and every night he asked questions I never had answers for. Now, after 3 years of accepting one painful reality, I was standing in front of a new possibility. Before leaving for the cafe, I called Karen and told her about the meeting. She insisted on staying nearby, but respected my decision to hear the truth myself first. I understood why she was cautious, but a part of me needed this moment. I needed to know what had happened from someone connected to Emily's disappearance. The cafe was small and quiet, located on a peaceful street away from the busy parts of the city. I arrived early and chose a table near the window. Every person who walked through the door made me wonder if they were the person I was waiting for. Then, about 10 minutes later, a woman entered. She looked around the room carefully before stopping near my table. I immediately recognized her from the airplane. It was the same woman Lucas had pointed at, the same face I had spent days trying to understand. She sat down slowly and looked at me with an expression filled with sadness and uncertainty. "Daniel," she said quietly. Hearing my name from her voice felt like stepping into a memory I thought was gone forever. I did not know what to say. My mind was filled with 1,000 questions, but only one came out. "Who are you?" The woman looked down for a moment before answering. "My name is Emily." For several seconds, the entire world seemed to become silent. I wanted to believe those words, but my mind struggled to accept them. The person sitting in front of me was either my wife or someone who looked exactly like her. "How is this possible?" I asked. Emily took a deep breath and explained that she never intended for 3 years to pass without contacting me. She said that after the incident, she woke up in a hospital far from home with no clear memory of what had happened. Because of the confusion surrounding her identity and missing personal records, she was unable to reconnect with the life she had before. She spent months trying to understand who she was and where she came from. Over time, she discovered pieces of information that led her closer to the truth, but every step created new complications. I listened carefully, trying to process every word. "Why did you not find me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I tried. I searched for you. I searched for Lucas. But every path I followed led to another unanswered question. I did not want to come back without knowing the truth." Hearing her say Lucas's name changed everything. This was not a stranger pretending to know my life. This was someone who remembered my son. Someone who remembered our family. Emily reached into her bag and placed a small item on the table. It was a silver necklace. The same necklace Lucas had described on the airplane. My hands became still as I looked at it. There was no longer any doubt that the woman in front of me was connected to the life I had lost. But even with the impossible truth sitting across from me, one question remained. If Emily had been alive all this time, what had kept her away from us for 3 years? For several minutes, neither Emily nor I said anything. We simply sat across from each other in that small cafe, two people connected by years of memories and separated by years of unanswered questions. I looked at her face, searching for the person I remembered and the person sitting in front of me at the same time. There were so many things I wanted to ask that I did not know where to begin. Finally, I took a deep breath and asked the question that had been weighing on me since the moment she said her name. "What happened after you disappeared?" Emily looked down at the table and slowly began to explain. She told me that after the accident, she woke up in a hospital several states away. She did not have clear memories of the events that brought her there, and the information available to the hospital staff did not immediately connect her to her previous life. Without her identification and with only fragments of memories, finding answers became a long and confusing process. She remembered pieces of her past. She remembered my voice. She remembered our home. She remembered Lucas. But every time she tried to put everything together, something was missing. She told me there were moments when she felt certain she had a family somewhere, but she could not prove who they were or where to find them. I listened quietly, trying to understand what those years must have been like for her. I had spent 3 years believing I was the only one who suffered the loss. Now I realized Emily had been living with her own unanswered questions. "When did you remember us?" I asked. Emily reached for the silver necklace on the table. "This helped me remember." She explained that the necklace was one of the few personal items she had with her when she woke up. For a long time, she did not know why it felt important. Then, slowly, memories started returning. She remembered giving Lucas a bedtime story. She remembered making breakfast in our kitchen. She remembered the sound of my laugh. But the memories returned like small pieces of a photograph instead of one complete picture. "I searched for you when I finally remembered enough," she said. "But I found out that everyone believed I was gone. I did not know how to return to a life that had already moved forward without me." Those words were difficult to hear. I thought about Lucas. I thought about every moment when he needed his mother and I had no answer for him. I wanted to be angry, but looking at Emily, I saw someone who had also lost 3 years she could never get back. Why did you not contact me when you saw my name? I asked. Emily took a moment before answering. She explained that when she finally discovered information connected to me, she was afraid. She did not know if I had moved on. She did not know if Lucas remembered her. She did not know if returning would bring happiness or create more confusion for everyone. Then I saw you and Lucas on that flight, she whispered. I saw him looking at me, and I knew I could not stay away anymore. My eyes moved toward the window as I tried to process everything. 3 years earlier, I had lost my wife. 3 days earlier, I thought I had discovered an impossible mystery. Now I was sitting across from the woman I had mourned, trying to understand how to bring her back into a life that had continued without her. Before we left the cafe, Emily asked the question I had been afraid to answer. Does Lucas know I am here? I looked at her and realized that our next conversation would be the most important one of our lives. Because finding Emily again was only the beginning. The harder question was how we would become a family again. The hardest part was not finding Emily again. The hardest part was deciding how to tell Lucas that the mother he had spent 3 years missing was suddenly coming back into his life. On the drive back to the hotel, I kept looking at the road ahead while my mind replayed every possible outcome. I imagined Lucas running toward her. I imagined him being confused. I imagined him asking questions I was not prepared to answer. More than anything, I wanted to protect him from carrying the same uncertainty I had carried for years. When we arrived at the hotel, Emily waited outside while I went inside with Lucas. I sat beside him on the edge of the bed and asked if he remembered the woman from the airplane. His eyes immediately became brighter. The woman who looked like Mom? He asked. I nodded slowly. Then I told him something I had not believed was possible a few days earlier. I told him that the woman on the plane was his mother. Lucas became completely still. For a moment, he did not say anything. Then he looked at me with the same serious expression he had on the airplane. I knew it was her, he said quietly. Those simple words carried so much emotion that I had to look away for a moment. Children sometimes understand things that adults spend years trying to explain. I told Lucas that his mother had been through a difficult situation and that there were many things we needed to talk about together. I told him that she loved him and that she had never forgotten him. After a few minutes, I asked if he wanted to see her. He nodded. When Emily walked into the room, time seemed to slow down. She stood near the doorway, nervous and unsure, while Lucas looked at her carefully. Neither of them moved at first. Then Lucas took a small step forward. Mom, he whispered. Emily covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She nodded and said his name softly. Lucas ran toward her, and Emily knelt down to hold him. It was a moment I had imagined so many times during those 3 years, but the reality was far more emotional than anything I had pictured. I stood nearby, watching the two people I loved most reconnect after so much time apart. Emily remembered small details about him that surprised me. She remembered his favorite bedtime story. She remembered how he used to organize his toy cars by color. She remembered the little questions he always asked before going to sleep. Lucas smiled because every memory made her feel less like someone returning and more like the mother he had always carried in his heart. That evening, we talked for hours. There were tears, questions, and moments of silence. But there was also something else. There was hope. Emily apologized for the years she had missed. She apologized for every birthday, every holiday, and every ordinary day she could not be there. Lucas listened quietly before saying something that surprised both of us. I was sad, but I never stopped loving you. I looked at Emily and saw the emotion on her face. Those words meant everything. Later that night, after Lucas fell asleep, Emily and I sat near the hotel window. The city lights reflected across the glass while we tried to understand how our lives had changed so quickly. We talked about the future, but we did not pretend everything would instantly become normal. 3 years could not disappear overnight. Trust and comfort would need time to return. But for the first time since Emily disappeared, we were no longer searching for answers. We finally had the truth. And tomorrow, we would begin the next chapter together. The first few weeks after finding Emily again were filled with moments I never thought I would experience. There were beautiful moments, like watching Lucas smile when his mother remembered one of his favorite childhood songs. There were also difficult moments, Moments when we all had to accept that love alone could not erase 3 years of missing time. We were grateful to have Emily back, but we also understood that becoming a family again would require patience. When we returned home, everything looked familiar, yet everything felt different. The house was the same place where Lucas and I had built our life after Emily was gone, but now every room carried a new meaning. The kitchen where I prepared every meal alone became the place where Emily and Lucas cooked together again. The living room where we watched old family movies became the place where we created new memories. One evening, Lucas brought out an old photo album. He sat between us on the couch and carefully turned each page. He pointed at pictures from before Emily disappeared and asked questions about moments he barely remembered. Emily answered every question she could, even the difficult ones. She never tried to pretend that the missing years did not happen. She told him the truth in a way he could understand. She told him that sometimes life takes unexpected turns, but love can still remain. I watched the two of them together and realized something important. I had spent years believing my family was broken forever. But maybe families are not defined by never facing hardship. Maybe they are defined by the decision to keep choosing each other afterward. Emily and I also had many conversations about what happened. We talked about our fears, our regrets, and the things we wished had been different. I admitted that part of me was afraid of losing her again. She admitted that part of her was afraid that I had moved on without her. Those conversations were not always easy, but they helped us rebuild something stronger than the relationship we had before. We were not trying to return to the past. We were creating a new future based on honesty and understanding. A few months later, Lucas had a school event where families were invited to attend. Before Emily returned, those moments had always been emotional for me because I knew he wished she could be there. This time, when we walked into the school together, Lucas held both of our hands. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. His teacher smiled and said it was wonderful to see his family together. That simple sentence meant more than she probably realized. Later that evening, we sat in our backyard watching the sunset. Lucas played nearby while Emily and I talked quietly. She looked at me and said, "I never thought I would have another chance to sit here with you." I smiled and answered, "I never thought I would get another chance either." We both knew the road ahead would not always be simple. There would still be questions. There would still be memories of the years we lost. But now we faced those things together. The woman I had mourned was sitting beside me. The son I had protected was laughing in front of us. And the family I thought I had lost was slowly becoming whole again. But there was still one final thing Emily needed to tell me. Something connected to the day she disappeared that would explain why the truth had remained hidden for so long. For the first time in 3 years, our home felt complete again, but Emily knew there was still a part of the story I had never heard. One quiet evening after Lucas went to sleep, we sat together at the kitchen table. The same table where I had spent countless nights wondering how I would raise our son alone. Emily held a small envelope in her hands, and I could see that whatever was inside had been weighing on her for a long time. "There is something I need you to understand," she said softly. I looked at her and waited. She explained that after she woke up in the hospital, she did not immediately know who she was. She remembered pieces of her life, but not enough to explain everything. The doctors helped her recover, but without clear identification, finding her previous records became difficult. During that time, she discovered information that suggested she had a family somewhere, but every lead seemed incomplete. Then she found an old contact connected to her past. That person helped her discover my name and Lucas's name. But when she searched further, she found records showing that I had already been told she was gone. She saw that Lucas had grown older and that we had built a life without her. "I thought I had lost my chance," she whispered. I listened carefully because I finally understood the fear behind her choices. She had not stayed away because she did not care. She had stayed away because she was afraid of returning as a stranger to the family she loved. The envelope contained copies of the documents she had collected while trying to understand what happened. Looking through them, I saw the years of confusion she had faced. I saw the effort she had made to find a way back to us. For a long time, I had carried the belief that I was the only person who lost something. But sitting there with Emily, I realized we had both been searching for the same thing. We were both trying to find our way back home. The following months brought many changes. Emily became part of Lucas's daily routine again. She attended school events, helped him with homework, and listened to his stories about everything he had experienced while she was gone. Sometimes Lucas would ask questions about the past, and Emily always answered honestly. She wanted him to understand that love could survive even when circumstances created distance. One year after the flight that changed everything, Lucas asked if we could take another family trip. He wanted to fly again. At first, I was surprised because that airplane had been the place where our lives changed forever. But then I realized something important. The flight was not only a memory of confusion anymore. It was also the moment that brought us back together. On the morning of our trip, Lucas sat by the window just like he had before. Emily sat beside him, holding his hand. I watched them both and felt grateful for a second chance I never expected to receive. As the airplane rose above the clouds, Lucas looked at me and smiled. "Dad," he said, "this time Mom is really sitting with us." I smiled because he was right. Some moments in life take everything you know and turn it upside down. But sometimes, those same moments lead you exactly where you were meant to be. I once believed my family was lost forever. Now I understood that love, patience, and hope can find their way back, even after years of uncertainty. And as we flew toward our next chapter together, I finally stopped looking behind us and started believing in the future ahead.